Hello there, and welcome to Find Your Voice. My name is Joe Crammond, and I'm the host of today's show. Today, we have a very special guest, Sherry Jiang. She's a co-founder of Blue Jay Finance, ex-Googler, and she is with us today to talk about her business, her background, and who she serves. And yeah, it's wonderful to have you on the show, Sherry. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Joe, for having me on the show.
No problem at all. So what we're going to do is, for our audience benefit as well, we're going to ask you some questions. It's going to come up on the screen, and we'll get to learn a bit about you and your background and everything else. And yeah, when you're ready, we'll get going.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
Perfect. Okay, so the first question is, if you had a business card, what would it say?
Um, in one sentence, it would say driving financial inclusion in Asia using blockchain tech. I think one sentence is okay. I wasn't sure if it's
That
supposed to be one word, but
I
I
think
think that,
that'll fit on a card just about. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
just
interesting.
about, right? With a bit of indentation, it should be okay.
Exactly. Yeah, that's great. So tell us a little bit about your business background and how you got started.
Yeah, so I can give maybe a quick introduction on myself. So, as you mentioned earlier, I got started with my career actually in big tech. So, I was at Google for a couple of years. Started out in Silicon Valley because I'm from the US originally, but I was actually working on quite a few products that were geared towards the emerging markets. Eventually moved out to Asia in Singapore in 2018, working on fintech for India. So actually, the product that I was working on eventually turned into Google Pay, and was really working on how to use digital payments to drive more financial inclusion in India and bring hundreds of millions of more people, from merchants to individual users, into a formal financial ecosystem. Um, so got firsthand experience with that part of the, I guess, fintech evolution in Asia. And Blue Jay really came about because I saw that the next evolution really comes from the infrastructural layer. So fintech did a lot of innovation from an application slash interface layer standpoint, but the infrastructure is actually still somewhat legacy, right? You're still working with Swift, you're still
Mm,
working with banking infrastructure. In India, they had something bank to bank called UPI. They still have it. In Singapore, we have something called FAST, right? And so there's limitations to what you can do if all you can do is innovate on that top layer. And so um, we decided to explore what it would be like to create financial products that are crypto native, in the sense that we're using crypto as the infrastructure. But the problem that we're solving actually is the same problem that any other fintech company wants to solve, which is how do you get more investment instruments, more capital opportunities in the hands of more people and businesses. And so that's what brought us to Blue Jay Finance. So Blue Jay Finance is a stable coin based fixed income product that connects the liquidity that exists in crypto to real world financing opportunities. So let me break that down a little bit more for perhaps for
it's a
the
mouthful. Yeah,
listeners.
it's interesting.
Yeah. So basically, the type of instrument that you would be using to invest in the product is a stable coin, which, as opposed to Ether and Bitcoin, is a crypto asset that follows the peg of a real world asset. So, be it the US dollar or Singapore dollar, or other currencies. And so, most people still do their investments, or when they have like a yield bearing investment, they still think of their local currency or their, currency they use in the real world versus like Bitcoin and Ether. Now, the fixed income component actually comes down to the opportunity to earn higher than like a risk-free rate yield on our platform. So risk-free yield often comes in the form of U.S. Treasury bonds or Singapore savings bonds, or your government sovereign government bonds, or it comes in the form of like your high yield bank or bank savings rate. Um, so what we provide on our platform is opportunities to actually beat the market, because the platform, Blue Jay Earn, actually allows for you to get access to private deals that typically have been reserved for institutions and not really
Right.
for individual investors. So the asset class that we focus on specifically is actually private credit. So basically, it's a debt that or debt instruments into different kind of businesses, be it small, medium businesses or startups within the Asia region.
Okay.
So all in all, our goal is to utilize crypto as an infrastructure, not as a value in and of itself, to make the movement of capital just a lot more efficient so that,
Mm,
you know, businesses on one end can have access to another source of capital that's more efficient and cheaper than what they typically have. And then on the investor side, right, you get access to an asset class, an alternative asset class that typically in the traditional world is much, much harder to get. So that's
mm.
yeah, that's us
That's
in
really detailed. Well, that's really interesting stuff. So, I mean, at the moment, then, is there anything that's making you nervous within the crypto space that's making you hesitant or unsure about things in any way?
uh I wouldn't say that there's anything that, makes me hesitant from the perspective of like the effect of crypto asset prices on our product.
Mm,
Because again, we're not a crypto asset platform. We are using crypto as an infrastructure layer to bring actually what is commonly traditional finance assets.
mm,
Um, it's just making it a lot more accessible. So even if Bitcoin goes up and down or Ether goes up and down, um, it doesn't really necessarily impact the attractiveness or the safety of the investments that we have on our platform. Now, the part that would worry me, I would say, is just the bleed over impact that the sentiment about the crypto industry could have on a product like ours, right? So there's always going to be fears about hacks about products, right? Again,
mm.
about protocols, just because it's still a new space, so there's always that risk. I think as an industry, there's been a few instances of counterparty risk playing out really badly last year, especially with the advent of the collapse of FTX, and then all of the contagion events that came about. So there's a lot of I would say managing concerns from users that is involved, just because there have been quite a few instances where people were burned in the industry. But
Right.
overall, I am so bullish about this. I mean,
Mm,
it's amazing that a few years ago when we were pitching doing payments for India at Google, like digital payments for India at Google, there were naysayers. There were people that were like, we're not really sure if India is ever going to move away from a cash-based economy. Like, we're not sure if this is the right product, right? But fast forward a few years, like Google Pay is the second largest player, and they're like, close to I think 200 million users now.
wow.
So to me, long term, like this makes sense. But of course,
Yes.
there's going to be short term variance in sentiment caused by certain bad actors and certain contagion effects that come about. But all in all, like, I'm so excited about what this can do to push that next boundary or push the boundaries when it comes to financial inclusion in Asia.
No, it's really interesting stuff. It sounds great. So, who's your target audience, would you say mostly?
Yeah. So we have two target audiences for our product. I'll start with uh, I would say the investor side of things. So number one would actually be high net worth, or I would say high income earners with at least $10,000 to half a million. I mean, it's a big range of investable capital that they want to allocate into passive income strategies that beat risk-free yield. And
Mm,
so again, these tend to be essentially, I mean, depending on the market you're in, classified as accredited investors. But still, they're oftentimes like if they're not working at, let's say, Goldman Sachs, right? They don't have access to credit deals, or if they don't know the right people, don't necessarily have access to alternatives. So our platform actually provides a way for some of these sophisticated individual investors to get access to an asset class that could really help with their investment goals. So
mm,
on the investor side, that's one category. The other category would actually be more so on the, I would say, institution side. So this would be family offices, custodians, crypto asset custodians, or funds that are looking for like some kind of fixed income strategy. So instead of like, I guess a profile of this would be similar to some like diversified bond fund that you
right.
may see, but essentially looking for They would be funds that are looking for like the 8% plus, somewhat conservative return profile, would potentially look at our product as a way of accessing that kind of risk and reward. So that is the target audience on the investor side. We are a two-sided market. So on the borrower side, or on the, I guess, the debt origination side,
Mm.
we're working with fintechs and alternative lenders in mostly Southeast Asia, who actually have a portfolio of many small to medium businesses, which include startups that they work with on debt financing. And so these include anything from, I think, on the shorter term, like working capital loans, to I guess longer term would be like project financing or infrastructure related financing. So these, again, are businesses that don't always fit the profile of what the banks naturally like to lend to the most. And maybe I'll explain
Mm.
what like I mean by this, right? Um, Oftentimes, if you're trying to raise debt capital of like 1 to 10 million, it's a bit of an awkward size, where it's almost like if you are, if your target as a bank is to have a total loan book size of 1 billion or more, right? You're looking, or that's pretty small, but maybe even bigger than that, right? Like 50 billion or more. You're looking at probably sizes of 100 million, right? And that's often going to come from corporations that are more established. And so
Mm.
those are being served and courted by many of the institutions, right? But then when it comes to some of these debt financings for 1 to 10 or even smaller, it's a lot harder to get the attention, because you're effectively like a long tail, right? And processes are not set up to be as automated for that to actually scale out to you as easily. So many companies will tell you that debt financing is very difficult to get, or
Mm.
very long and drawn out in Asia. Um, the other reason why it's difficult, and why they turn to our platform, is actually based on the sector as well. So there is a bit of a bias towards lending to industries that are a little bit more traditional, right? Like real estate. I mean, people have been investing in real estate for the longest time. I mean, it's existed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago, right? But ESG, solar panel companies, right? It might not be as easy for certain institutions to know how to underwrite credit tech risk, right? But you may have investors around the world who can and are willing to take on the risk, but they're just not these institutions. So those
Mm.
are like the problem areas of that kind of keep cap uh, prevent capital allocation from being as efficient as it could be. And so that's why they're part of our target audience when it comes to the debt origination side.
That's really interesting. That's great. Well, just looking at sort of like your background then, Sherry. So, what would you say was the last time you had to sort of leave something behind, and what was it and why?
um I mean, I wouldn't call it like leaving behind, because they're still there, but working at Google was just an amazing experience. I mean, it's just, you sometimes in life you feel like you have to choose between being surrounded by smart people and being surrounded by nice people. And I
Mm.
feel like at Google everybody was smart and like just like nice in the sense that like you can assume good intentions, right?
Mm.
I really miss that community, right? I think having been there for like more than half a decade, it becomes almost like family to you, right? And
Mm.
so uh yeah, I guess like that is an example of leaving something behind. But at the same time, I still have, the colleagues I've had before, my friends at Google that I still keep in touch with. But it is something that I don't take for granted, because, again, people say when you start out your career somewhere, it really shapes the person that you are going to become,
Mm.
especially in your professional kind of personality for the rest of your life, right? And so I'm really grateful that I had a lot of amazing role models that really embodied service leadership to the user, cared about having a mission driven focus for the business, but also had a standard of excellence, right, for the team. And so I carry a lot of that with me when it comes to building my own company as well.
That's really interesting. So, what were you doing at Google? What was your role there?
Yeah. So I was in a role called product marketing manager, which a lot of people do ask, isn't that just product manager? And I would say it's a little bit different in that um, the way I describe it is you know the user, you know the product, and you connect the two. So it's a little bit of marketing, a little bit of product, but at the end of the day, it's about knowing your users like your brothers and sisters, right? Like where do
Mm,
they eat when they wake up? What do they think about? Why 5 layers deep? Do they like your product? Do they not like your product? And just like develop such a deep understanding of that that it
mm,
leads to insights around where the product should move,
mm,
what kind of features make sense to build and which ones are unessential, and figure out how to create a communication strategy that really speaks to them. And
yeah.
so uh, that's probably why, I mean, our one thing that we really try to do with our company is to be extremely customer obsessed. We have everybody on the team do user research at least once. We've talked to hundreds of people. So that's something that I think my background has really like led me to focus a lot more on, which is a bit of this irony in like the web3 crypto space, because there's so much of this like anonymity when it comes to users. It's like their wallet addresses, you don't really know who they are. And
Mm,
people don't often do that level of user research because it's very difficult, but we find creative ways to actually connect with users in very old school ways, to be honest. Really just like sitting down and having a conversation over coffee if they're willing to actually meet you in person.
yeah, that's really good. So you're really sort of helping build out your customer avatar and making them feel like they're a part of a community as well,
Yeah.
not just another number. That's really interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
so if we were writing a script, a movie about your life, then sort of describe the opening scene for us. What would you say that would be if it was a movie about your life?
Yeah. Uh, honestly, I think that the opening scene will actually not be about me specifically, but actually will be about my parents. So like I always say that my life is this funny like east to west to east journey, because my family is actually originally from China. My parents are Shanghainese, and moved over to the States in the 80s. And I guess the opening scene would probably be like maybe my father's first day at graduate school in Michigan or something like that. But the reason why that this is really impactful for me is because I think that in a way, a lot of what I'm doing is based off of, I guess, a continuation of what they've done for me. So,
Mm,
they at the time looked to create better opportunities for, well, I guess they're kids now, my brother and I, by moving to the US and giving us the privilege of being able to attend amazing schools, go to
mm,
university, and just never worry about like access to opportunities being the reason why we couldn't get to a certain place in life or be comfortable, right? And you know, but despite that, I feel like I've always felt, even though I grew up in the U.S., right, I've always felt um, this like tie to Asia of like, there's still so much that I think from an economic development standpoint, there's so much that I think is super exciting that can be worked on, right? And
mm,
so it's almost like I feel like I can take the opportunities I've had to uh, you know, go through the education system in the US, go through, a large company experience like Google, and bring that to the markets here in Asia where there's tremendous opportunity to like, do things like build technologies for digital financial inclusion or, other spaces as well. So it's my parents often do joke. They're like, we worked so hard to bring you to the US and you're just going back to Asia. But I think that is something that is kind of this intergenerational thing that matters a lot to me, to
mm.
effectively give back to the region or the place that my parents are from.
Mm-hmm. No, that's really inspiring. That's great. Well, Sherry, this has been wonderful, and thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. Where do we find more about you and your business?
Yeah, so multiple places. To About myself specifically, I have a Twitter account at Sherry Yan Jang. You'll see me talk about Blue Jay, but I will often post about tech. I'm an avid poker player, so I will also post about that sometimes. Um, so that's on my Twitter, and then I have a LinkedIn account as well. I will have a little bit more, I would say, long form content that I post there. So I actually have a blog that I run on the side besides BlueJ. I do have some side projects. So this one I actually write with somebody else about just general kind of macro level thoughts around the crypto industry. So I'll publish some of that on my LinkedIn. So that's on my personal. And then to follow BlueJ and learn more about BlueJ, we also have a Twitter account at BlueJ Finance. And then we also have if you are looking to actually learn more about private credit before deciding whether or not you want to use BlueJ to access private credit, we actually have the ability to access our Telegram group as well. So those are a few different ways to stay up to date about BlueJ and learn a little bit more about it.
Nice, really interesting. So just go back to the poker then. How do you do with that? Is that something that you're successful at?
So I would say, I mean, poker is a bit of a random thing that happened, but I was very bored during the pandemic, and had to pick up a hobby that could pass hours of time,
Mm,
and connect with people, right? And so
yeah.
that started around then, and after things opened up, it became a great way to meet people as well, both
Mm,
personally and also professionally as well. And generally, I think it's a great game, and it's a microcosm for life, right? Because everything is about calculated risk-based decision making as an
mm,
investor, as a founder, as someone making decisions about family. Like all of it is just decision making under uncertainty. So I would say it's almost a metaphor for life in a way. So there's a lot of little lessons you can draw. So
mm.
it's just something I enjoy on the side.
That sounds like a podcast episode in itself. Definitely talking about that. No, that's great.
Yeah,
Well, Sherry, it's been an absolute pleasure and mesmerizing to listen to your expertise and knowledge within your industry. So I appreciate your time. And for anyone else looking to create a thought journey with podcast guesting, follow us at www.podcastguesting.pro. Visit the site and get in contact with us, and we will help you become a thought leader within your industry. So, Sherry, it's been wonderful, and thank you very much for your time. And goodbye, everyone. Take care for now.
thanks, Joe.